Hey, thanks so much for coming back and listening. We're going to talk about what it means to partner with parents. And Mariah, I think I've seen you work in a couple of different areas of life. We served in ministry together. You've been involved even in the school systems and things like that. And so we recognize when it comes to sharing life with students, with children, that their parents are a part of the package as well. And so we recognize that it's important for us to partner with them in ministry. We're not surrogate parents. We're not trumping what a parent's desire is. So we need to be able to partner with them and help come alongside of parents. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So when you're thinking as a leader and you're interacting with a student, what are some of the things that you need to think about as it relates to I'm coming alongside a parent to help them raise their kid and ultimately point them towards Jesus?
Yeah, one of the first things I always think about when I start to have like a one-on-one relationship with students, I always want to think about their background. Like, what voices are they hearing at home? What might they have already been taught? Because obviously I want to teach them truth. I want to teach them the gospel, but I also don't want to disrespect their parents in any way when it comes to just like simple things, how they're raised or how they act or how they behave. So I try to use context clues to get to know them, even when we're talking, like, well, what do your parents think about that? And as we're navigating, and if it goes to a deeper relationship with that student, and you start to feel like, oh, they really look up to you, or they're really coming to you for a lot of things that typically some people might come for parents, just to remind them in the relationship what you are. Like the constant reminder of like, well, I'm not your parent. I'm just here. I'm your leader. I'm coming beside you. I'm championing you. But there might be sometimes where we really need to communicate with the parent too.
Sure.
So just to kind of always, in the best way possible, tell the student where you are at with your relationship with them, and that you do want to include their parent on some of these decisions and conversations that you're having, because it's their life too, and that's their primary caretaker, and so they need to be involved, and they need to know some of the things that we're working with, because we're all in it together. We can't have it like one out of the picture. They all need to be together.
Yeah, and it's important for us to know there's two sides to every story, right? So there will be lots of times where you need to follow up with and connect with a parent to find out something more about what's going on. And nowadays too, in the church, if a student is there with you and they're in your youth group, it does not mean that their parents have a relationship with Jesus.
Right, yeah.
We've had numerous students over the years whose parents aren't saved, and that creates a whole unique role in interacting with students. But I have found that you can still be very respectful of the parents, because whether a parent is saved or not, for the most part, they still want their kid to be happy and healthy. They might not know how to do it, and they may do it in some really poor ways because they have a picture of what it should look like. But there's ways that we can still come alongside them, honor them as parents, so that we're not trying to teach kids to be disrespectful to their unsaved parents. If anything, they have a beautiful opportunity to demonstrate God's humility and His mercy and His grace as a kid towards a parent, and them as an authority and things like that. And we can help them pace through that and model that with them. How do you, when a student comes to you and they say this to you, I've got something I need to tell you, but you can't tell my parents. What does that look like?
Yeah. First, it's an honor to they trust you, right?
Yeah.
They trust you with something so deep that they don't really want anyone else to know. And in that case, they don't want their parents to know. So you're already establishing that there's trust there. So typically how I would respond is saying, well, I see that you trust me so much that you want to tell me. Can you also agree that you might trust me how I might handle the situation? Because what I have is love for you, and I need you to trust me that because I'm in this position with you, I want to handle it the best way possible. And in some cases, it might be telling your parents. So if you trust me enough with this information because you know that I love you and I have the best interest for you, please trust me enough that whatever information you're telling me, I'm going to handle it in the best way possible. It might not be talking to your parents. It might just be like, okay, well, let's talk about this over the next few weeks, and we'll do a plan together. But when it comes to certain issues, most kids know what adults have to tell their parents or what do they have to report. So they're not unaware of those things.
Sure.
But just reiterating them allows them to think, okay, then they have the choice to know.
Sure.
But most of the times they're like, yeah, I understand, and then just go for it
Yeah.
and tell anyways.
Yeah. So one of the
Yeah.
principles I'm hearing you say, and we've talked about this throughout the whole, like, what does it mean to be a disciple, is in being accountable, responsible, mature adult. You don't ever say to a student, I promise I'll never tell anyone about this, right?
Right.
Because you can get yourself backed into some pretty lousy corners, and then you're compromising their trust and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, like you said, if you're upfront with them and you're like, thank you so much for trusting me. Trust me enough that we'll do what we need to with the information, and we'll do it together, right? If we do decide we have to go talk to your parents, we'll make a plan. We'll figure out we can do it together. I'll come with you if you need that moral support. But it would be a very poor idea to be like, absolutely. And sometimes like there's this a little bit of like, we want them to trust us so much, and we want to be their buddy, and we want to be on their side. That like, all right, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Like, there's this kind of like part of our heart that like wants to be able to say to them, you can trust me, and I'll never betray your trust, so that they'll like confide in you. But in the long run, it always short circuits that process.
I've multiple times I've gotten phone calls at like 11 o'clock at night, and they'd be like, Mariah, you got to come pick me up. You got to come pick me up. And I will say, if I can, I'll be like, listen, if I come pick you up, it's not because you didn't want your parents to come pick you up, because they didn't want them to know what they're picking you up
Right.
from. I'm coming pick you up, and then we're going to have a conversation with your parents for whatever this is.
Yeah.
So just saying it right then and there.
Sure.
I'm not your scapegoat.
Part of rescuing them in that moment is preparing them to not be in potential future moments like that as well, right?
Yeah.
For sure. How do you deal with things where the student is trying to get you to take sides with them? Like, I have found in ministry a lot of times kids are looking for advocates to defend their side or their position. How would you interact with a student who's like, my parents, this, but they're so wrong, right? Like, we know differently. And sometimes this shows up a lot when the parents are unsaved, but it certainly has shown up plenty of times in ministry where the parent may have a different biblical perspective on something, or a different standard as it relates to something. How do you help students navigate through side taking?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times recently, it's been hard truths about the Bible and how they're taught and what that means for their life, of what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. So the first thing I try to do in those situations is bring it back to the Bible of what I know to be the truth, because they can't really argue with me on that. And then I just go back to, well, how do you communicate that with your parent? What are those types of conversations? Have you told them how you felt about their feelings on this? Most of the times it's no, they just let it happen. So I try to just navigate mediating a conversation between the parent and the student versus me throwing myself in the middle of a conversation that could be with them. I try to take myself out of it wholly, so that I don't get in
That's great.
friction with maybe what the parent is saying, because there's sometimes I don't agree. I'm like, that were my kid, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But that's not my place. It's not my job to raise them. So what I can do is try to mediate them having a healthy conflict of where they're having the conflict.
That's great. That's a great suggestion, and it keeps you from being a pawn in a piece of power struggle, and that gets at some of the things we've talked about in some of our other videos related to like some of the source idol issues. Rarely is the real reason between my mom wants me to do this and I want to do that. Usually it boils down to a deeper issue that we can address, and then that helps them kind of see health. And at the end of the day, your parent may still be right in this, and we got to humble our heart in this situation and move forward. Let's shift gears for just a moment, and let's talk through some of like the administrative communication, like practical stuff, and helping to partner with parents and set them up for success, because there's a lot of asks that we have in youth ministry and students. So I want to pick up your kid and we want to go to a ball game together, or we have an event coming up, a retreat coming up, or helping them understand what we're doing. What do you guys do when you gather together? So many parents come from so many different backgrounds. They have different ideas of what you're doing when you're together. Help people think through, how do we communicate with our parents what we're doing and why we're doing it? What are some suggestions or some things that you've done in your years of ministry?
Yeah, I would say always, always, always be organized and be intentional with the communication that you're putting out. I just think about everything that you sign your kid up for: school functions, team organizations. you're probably not going to send them if their admin or whatever they're communicating is like all over the place. Like it's a mess. You're like, well, they don't have this together. How are they going to take care of my kid?
Yeah.
How am I going to send them on a week away because they can't even get this down? So I think that having all that together first already sets them to trust you because you're like, oh, they're really organized. They got their stuff together.
Yeah.
So that means that just shows a reflection of your character of maybe what the week that you're going with the student or the weekend you're going with the student shows the parent that you have it together.
Sure.
So it allows them to trust you.
Yeah.
And then it also just giving them a glimpse of what you are doing. Like be open in communication of that. Like what is happening at your event? What does a Wednesday night or a weekly service you have look like? Don't hide anything. Like you should be proud about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So let the parents know, give them opportunity to celebrate it with you.
Sure.
Is really helpful for them to just have full trust of doing whatever the student is going to do with you.
I always like also helping to communicate the why behind the what of the things that we're doing as well. So like if I'm asking a parent to spend potentially a couple $100 for us to go to camp and helping them understand the why, the what becomes really easy. And so talking through the intentionality of us going away and us getting together or even helping them understand, because again, the part of this partnering with the parent piece is recognizing they're still the parent, right? I get to spend maybe at the most a couple of hours a week with a student, and oftentimes less than that. They're spending exponentially more hours with their students, or with their children. So helping them either understand why we're doing certain things so that they can replicate some of those things in their own homes, or providing them opportunities to speak into their own kids' lives on spiritual matters and discipleship. Like what a great partnership opportunity for them to just not be like, hey, what'd you guys do this weekend? Or what did you talk about tonight? If they've been primed a little bit and you can do this with some clear communication to give them an idea of what it is that you talked about tonight, then it's a great follow-up conversation that they can have with their student, and they get to be invited into this discipleship process with them as well.
Yeah. Having those like online communications or even email blasts that you send out also open the door for you to have other in-person communication opportunities. If their student goes to the same church as them on a Sunday, it kind of opens the door for that parent to come up to you and talk to you about stuff. It just opens the door for a conversation for you to get to know the parent too. And then also, if your student goes to your youth group, but their parents don't go on church on a Sunday, they start to see who the kid is going to. But then also it gives you room to, if you want to, like go out in the parking lot when they get picked up, be like, hey, I'm so-and-so. You always interact with our stuff. It's a good way to do that because you might not see them on a Sunday, but there are little ways that you can start to get to know someone's parent because you have those online communications open and ready for that.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit here as we get ready to close, as well as that not always going to the parent when there's a problem, but ways in which that we can communicate the parent that open up the door for more intentional life shared together.
Yeah, a lot of the times in school functions and with youth group, you could be going to the parent a lot to tell them like, oh, this is going on. But sometimes there's a lot of students that they don't have things like that going on. So you might even not have the opportunity to talk about the student with that parent on that level. So going up to them on a Sunday or going up to them in the parking lot and be like, hey, I just love your kids' laugh. It makes my day every time they are there. I love how pumped they get about things. I love their heart. I love how tender they are. If start to compliment the student on things that they might see at home too.
Sure.
That allows the parent to know that you are actually getting to know their kid.
That's right.
They're seeing the kid, they're knowing the kid, and everyone wants their kid to feel loved and seen.
Right.
Especially the kids that don't really get attention all the time. To really be intentional about those types of students too, just shows the parent that you're in it.
Yeah, and even that parent that's like, oh, well, you get the best of my kid, they still love hearing. Like, they're kind of sarcastic, and it may be some degree
That was
true.
me, my mom. That's my mom's response all the time. Oh, you get the best of her. So let it happen. Let it be like, I love it.
Yeah.
It's so great.
And letting, and part of that communication is letting them know that you're there to support them, you're there to encourage them, you're there to be their biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
And in almost every case that I've found, when you're loving on their kid and you're talking them up and you're encouraging the parent in the way that they're raising their kids, man, does it just open all the doors for continued relationship and great partnership with parents.
I just remember one time going up to a mom and just saying to her, I'm like, you know, your daughter loves you so much. She talks about you all the time. She talks about what you guys do at home. And like, they're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, okay. Like, and so they just makes them feel good too.
Yeah, that's
so,
good.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for spending some time listening to this video together. Just keep in mind that your role as a mature, loving, accountable adult is to come alongside families and help point their kids to Christ. And in doing so, it may even be a beautiful opportunity for you to point their parents to Christ as well. So take advantage of every opportunity as you're partnering with parents. Thanks.